Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Moises Esparza. I'm the exhibitions manager for the San Diego Latino Film Festival. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for another round of Meet the Filmmakers, our daily, video chat show that we organize with filmmakers screening films on that particular day. Really excited to be entering day 7 of our annual celebration of Latinx cinema. We're past the halfway point, but we still have a lot of amazing films to screen. We're going to be doing some encores of films that play during the first half, but we still have plenty of films left to premiere. So continue building your schedules, reviewing our film guide, and indulging in all of the amazing programming that we have to offer. The magic of a film festival is that, or this film festival is that we can connect virtually, but we can also connect at our drive-in activation planned for Saturday, March 20th. We're going to be doing a double feature. We're going to play a Argentine film called El Retiro and the classic Buena Vista Social Club. Prior to the films, Kimba Light will be providing musical entertainment. Doors open at 5 p.m. This is all taking place at Westfield Mission Valley Mall. And we're really excited to be able to connect with all of you during this community screening. We had such a great time during our launch days drive-in at the South Bay. We're trying to recreate some of the magic at Westfield Mission Valley Mall. So I hope to see many of you there. Well, without much further ado, let's introduce the filmmakers participating in today's panel. We won't be getting too in-depth their films. This is more of a free-flowing discussion of films, inspirations, creativity, but you are still able to leave comments in our chat section. I can put them on screen, or if you have questions for particular guests, feel free to do the same as well. Okay, let's introduce our panelists. We have Rafael Flores. Hi, Rafael, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Luis Martinez. Hi, Luis.
Hey, you guys tired of me yet?
No. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, and we have Juan Francisco Urrusti. Hi, Juan Francisco. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm honored to be with you right now.
The honor's all ours. Thank you to each of you for letting us screen your wonderful projects. I know the landscape right now is forcing us to do virtual screenings. The irony is that cinemas open in San Diego on Friday, so it's kind of we were almost there. But in the interest of public safety, I think we're approaching this the right way by holding this festival virtually. Why don't we start by talking a little bit about your respective films, maybe a logline, elevator pitch, nothing too in depth because each of you have respective Q&As where you'll do, I guess, some more in-depth analysis of your films. So, Rafael, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So my film is called Amimatria. It's a 30-minute film, more or less, and it's about the unconstitutional repatriation of my grandmother during the 1920s Mexican Repatriation Act in the United States. And the story of me returning to Tijuana to take her back to where she was born in Terracota, Orange County, 85 years after never returning back to her place of birth. And it's an experimental poetic essay featuring poetry by Rigoberto Gonzalez and Juan Felipe Herrera.
Wow. I should also mention that Rafael's and Luis's shorts were screened during our drive-in launch day at South Bay. Were you there, Rafael, at the drive-in? Were you able
Unfortunately, no. And my grandmother actually lived about a block and a half away from there. So, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it down there.
Oh, okay. Well, Luis was at the drive-in.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about your short?
Yeah, our short is called Oscar's Story. Oscar Velazquez is a cinematographer, DP in San Diego. That's probably the biggest reason that some of my movies look the way as good as they do. He's the classic example of finding somebody that's better at something than you and letting them shine on your projects. And he's part of the DACA program, which means he lives his life with like a piano over his head, because during the last 4 years, he was afraid to tell people about it because he didn't want to be outspoken. He didn't want to get backlash. He was afraid that somebody might get a bug up their butt and try to mess with him. But at that time, he was cool with us doing a short doc about it, because there's all this focus on the border and all the stuff, but the kids that are already here, they're engineers, they're scientists, they're artists, they're poets, they're the people that are right next to you, you know? So it's just kind of like a little insight into his mind. And it's ironic that now that the movie's being shown, it probably would have had a bigger impact like 18 months ago during that time, but he feels more comfortable with it being out now because of that, which is kind of a sad statement of the fact that telling your own story sometimes, or your friend's story, can be scary. So we did that, and we're glad that it's getting that people are watching it. And now when I talk to him, he's like, well, I'm not scared anymore of people watching it and repercussions, but I wish I would have been more vocal and I would have said more. I was like, wow, let's make it a series.
Thank you, Luis. Juan Francisco, tell us a little bit about your feature documentary.
Well, I've made mostly what called ethnographic films, about Mexican indigenous cultures. But my last two films, or my two most recent films, I hope they're not the last ones, are about my family. I feel very comfortable making films about my family because, number one, I learn about their lives. And number two, I have found many things I'm proud of them, through this research. And they're family films not only because they deal about their stories, but also because several members of my family have been involved in the project. Like, for instance, in this occasion, which is a film about my aunt, a painter. She just received her first vaccination, or her very first shot. She arrived together with my parents and my grandparents in Mexico at the end of the Spanish Civil War. So Mexico was the country that took them in, and thanks to this country, they were able to remake their lives, to make new lives, and to have actually successful lives in terms of what they have been able to contribute to the country. And so this film is like a homage, because I think that films should also tell stories of migration, of immigrants. There are happy stories. Humanity has been a history of migrations, and sometimes we only hear about particularly in when we have kind of right-wing regimes, awful stories about migrants. But I think that whenever, independently, whichever country you take, migrants have always contributed to the country they take them in. And this is one of those stories. When my nephew made the music, my brother-in-law was a sound recordist, and well, since it's a low-budget film, I had to do a number of things in the film. I produce it, direct it, but it's a family film, and the good thing is that, well, my aunt is happy to know that the film is being screened at this moment in San Diego.
Thank you, Juan Francisco.
Thank you.
It's really neat that I find myself speaking with documentarians. So I have some questions for you, perhaps, about your philosophy as documentarians and maybe the documentary tradition. I'm wondering, in trying to tell authentic stories about your families, your friends, are there certain boundaries that documentarians need to observe, or cinematic boundaries that are established that a documentarian should not cross in telling these stories authentically? And whoever wants to speak can do so, or if there are no boundaries, that's also okay. I'm gonna call on someone. Yeah.
I don't know. You know, I mean, my initial reaction to that is that, you know, there are ethics in terms of how you approach filmmaking. I mean, I think not just documentaries, but I think just filmmaking, period. Exploitation is definitely something that I think we all have to be aware of, you know. But at the same time, I think it's about your mode of production. It's how you engage the community and how you engage them in the creation of that vision, right? You know, they say I teach at San Francisco State University. I teach documentary film production and Chicano cinema, and you know, they say, you know, that there are no borders, right? That we cross all borders, right? And but at the same time, I think that, you know, you have to be cognizant, right? That at the same time, you could, you know, offend somebody, you could hurt somebody if they're revisiting a traumatic memory, right? But you can also facilitate closure, right, to these types of issues as well. So, I mean, I think that, you know, how I gauge the community is always about a community mode of production and how they contribute to that. But we always say in film school that filmmaking is a dictatorship. It's not a democracy, because if there's too many cooks in the kitchen, then the recipe gets, you know, destroyed, right? So there has to be a guiding force, a creative vision. But I think at the same time, you have to be as considerate as you possibly can, but you can't walk on your tippy toes or be concerned about offending people, because then that's a never ending game that you're going to play with yourself. So.
All right. Thank you for that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Luis or Juan Francisco?
I fully agree with Rafael. You know, people we deal with have a name, have a family, have a reputation, and it is our duty, you know, to treat people as we would like to be treated, you know, ourselves. Not to fool anybody, because in the end, the only people we can fool is ourselves. And I think that, you know, fooling or trying to fool an audience in the end has a bad ending. You know, you lose the most valuable asset you have, which is your credibility. So, but what I ask myself is, how can my film benefit not only me, you know, but the people in the film? And that's the main question that one asks oneself when making a documentary. How am I going to affect that person's life, you know, with this film? And it's like, go do the good things and the bad things, and you have to, you know, to put them on a scale, and make sure, you know, that the good things are far more, you know, than the people, and that, you know, you can risk yourself, but you cannot risk other people's. I mean, it's not a character that some screenwriter wrote or designed and that he can kill at any time, you know, or a producer because the rating is low. You cannot kill anybody in a documentary, and it's good, you know, because our goal is not to. Our goal is to understand people, and to make those people understood by others, why they do things the way they do them, why do they act like the way they act, and to be empathetic, or with them, empathetic. And well, I've been lucky because I've been, throughout my life, I've been able to work with people I like, and I try to. I'm always listening to stories, and those stories that inspire me. People inspire me to make those to take those stories to a screen, and I've been lucky because I have been only been. I've never had to deal with people that I don't like.
Thank you, Juan Francisco. Luis, do you have any feedback?
I'm mostly just here to learn about this because this is my first real doc. I've watched hundreds, if not thousands, of documentaries, both on my own as well as being part of the festival and doing some Q&As, having the opportunity to watch some of them. So I'd like to think that if I wanted to, and curiously enough, in my career, I've been approached to do a couple of documentaries moving forward, that I've known enough from the finished product as to how to avoid those pitfalls. For this one, it was what I talked about, which is, there's people out there that hate me or hate you or hate us because the color of our skin and where we're from, and they lump us all together into broad terms. So putting something out there, I wanted to feel clean. I wanted to feel like putting it out there wasn't putting my friend in jeopardy. Putting it out there wasn't putting other people in jeopardy. But I still struggled with being, because I think if we were being 100% more honest, like me and Oscar probably would have been like a lot angrier in the story because of the things that's happened to him and it's happened to us in our lives and the people that affects. So I'm learning, so I love hearing from you guys about what the process is for other documentarians. But it's a line between wanting to get your message out, wanting to scream because you're angry at something, but also not wanting that message to cause somebody else to take action against a loved one or to move the discussion or to move it to a different place where other things can happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the documentary form I find to be very malleable and adjustable and translatable, really. I'm wondering, there's a documentary playing at our festival called Off the Road, which has elements of a Western in it. I wonder if you, through your films or through your documentaries, have explored with genre or like different modalities to enhance the story you're telling, or do you prescribe more to perhaps more cinema verite tradition, or can they both exist at the same time, perhaps? If anyone wants to jump in.
I think they can totally exist at the same time. I don't see why they would be mutually exclusive. I'll just say real quickly, like I take a very formalist approach. I take a very academic approach, just because of what I do. But there's a famous professor actually who was faculty here at San Francisco State University, and he coined the terms the 6 modes of documentary representation. His name is Bill Nichols, and he's a professor emeritus, and I think he teaches in Colorado now or something. But he's pretty much semi-retired. But he developed the 6 modes of representation as a way to kind of classify or attempt to kind of associate patterns of documentary modes, right? And so he identifies the basic ones. I'm sure people have heard this before, but you can just Google it if people are curious, But they have the first one was really the poetic mode, right? That you see films like just images and sounds bombarding you, and it's about emotion, and it's about a feeling, and it's lyrical, right? The way that it's edited, right? So films like Koyaanisqatsi or Baraka or Regan that was made in the 1920s, right? Around that time. So, images and sounds, right? The second one is observational, fly on the wall approach. You don't interact with the subject. You remain objective. It's about truth. Frederick Wiseman and City Cut Follies, right? I mean, Frederick Wiseman is probably the most famous observational documentarian. And then you have expository, the voice of God, that the March of Penguins, right? What's his name?
Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman, right? His voice, right? The voice of God. And then, which is evidentiary editing. That's what all my clients want. right? You know, they just want, you hear dog, you see dog, right? You hear cat, you see cat, right? And so, you know, so very cool editing. And then you have the reflexive, which is the story of making the documentary, right? The behind the scenes documentary of the documentary, which is about form and the process of creating, typically very popular with filmmakers, right? And then you have the participatory, which is the Michael Moore. You go on the journey with the audience, you process the information for them. Sometimes you directly speak directly to the audience, right? And then you have the performative, right? And the performative is very much like Borat-ish, if you will, right? Where you play a role and then you capture the response of the people. So it's not about objectivity, it's more about subjectivity. So it's the exact opposite of the expository. But I think that a great documentary, for those of you who haven't seen it, is Exit Through the Gift Shop, because I feel that Exit Through the Gift Shop probably embodies all of those modes actually in one. And that's in fact what Nichols says. He says that the modes are not mutually exclusive, that in fact where they overlap is where the really truly interesting forms of innovation occur, right? So anyway, I'll stop being academic. Sorry for that.
No,
this is amazing.
I teach a lot, you guys. I teach a lot, you know.
Where would you put something like because some of my favorites are like Grizzly Man or like The Act of Killing, or those kind of feel like they would be in those first couple of categories, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Grizzly Man, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I think that that's observational because, you know, he's observing, he's not interacting per se. But the minute you start going into the talking head interviews, that becomes expository, you know. Poetics and reflexives are much less common. And participatory as well is not, performative is also not as common either. But Michael Moore popularized participatory, right? I mean, he's the one who makes all the money, right? So I guess other modes work.
Yeah, I wonder if The Act of Killing is performative, perhaps.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Okay.
Oppenheimer, or the Look of Silence is the follow-up to that.
Yeah.
Juan
Francisco, do you have
casting Jean Benet, which is on Netflix? That would be performative. Casting Jean Benet.
I haven't seen that one. Okay.
Yes, I also used like those categories that Rafael just mentioned in my classes, documentary classes. But I find that there are no documentaries that are pure, of a certain form. And I think that's good, because otherwise you would just be following like a square recipe, and there would be no room for change or for creativity. So what I try to do is when I have some material that I already gathered, film or sound, I try to find a shape and a structure, like what kind of story can I tell with the material that I've got. And then I try to look for the shape or the structure or the kind of narrative that I need in order to tell that story, But usually it comes out from the material itself. You just have to, I think it was Michelangelo who said that his task was not to sculpt, but to find the figures that were already within or inside the rock. He said, well, I try to remove, the surplus of the material, and to find the figure that was already inside that rock. Well, maybe I'm not comparing myself to Michelangelo. It's just saying that you have maybe it's trying to see what the material looks like and to handle it as least as possible. You have to, intervene in that material, but to me, or for me, the less is more. Less intervention is maybe more respect for the material or for the people there. But it's important. We're talking about shapes, forms, and form is very important because form gives you rhythm also, and a number of things that documentary has to have, or any film has to have.
And Luis, I think you brought up a good point too, because it's not just about documentaries as well. I mean, I think you mentioned you do narratives as well. I'm sure we all do narratives, and so what I find interesting is blurring the line between documentary and fiction, and docu-fiction. And so I have a lot of films that explore that as well. So I agree. I think that, you want to have an organic structure to your story, to have it emerge from the content, but as long as you have that overarching premise, that moral of the story, because if you don't have that, for me, I noticed a lot of like young filmmakers oftentimes don't have that, and they don't really know what they're trying to say, right? So you have to kind of read through the text to figure out what that thread is. I find that the most challenging part, I would say, of analysis, but also creation.
I was watching. Oh, I didn't mean to. I was watching 499 because I'm doing the Q&A for it, and I kept trying to figure out what documentary it was reminding me of, because it seemed like a postpartum on like the last 500 years of Mexican culture, but it's also has narrative. It has like a full on, and I was realizing that it doesn't like really. It reminds me of 17 different documentaries, and yet none of them. And what you said before about kind of that mixture of like that docudrama, it's like exactly like the category that would fall into.
The one that I really like is The Thin Blue Line with Errol Morris. It's a very famous.
It's a great documentary.
Right, and that for me is a really good example of exactly what you just said, Luis. But sorry to cut you off.
No, that's I'm writing shit down because I'm learning as I go. But I wanted to ask you guys, as that's okay with Moises, when you guys are planning out a doc, because I'm starting the process now. How important is the writer? Because I feel like you can do one of two things. You can really structure it out ahead of time and say, this is exactly what I want. I'm going to talk to this guy. And when I'm talking to this guy, we're going to show these images. And then when I'm talking to this person, we're going to do this. And this is going to be music. And I'm just going to write it out and just do my best to accomplish, in like a narrative film, get the shots and the quotes that I need. Versus I know other people that are doing documentaries, like you said, like Exit Through the Gift Shop, where they just do years and years of just footage and footage and footage. And then they find the story later in the editing room, just scrubbing through footage and finding little pieces and pieces here. And I've also done interviews with over the years for Q&As for the festival the last couple of years, where documentarians have told me, like, we started off doing this documentary about this one person, and they knew we were making a documentary about them. But when we started finding stuff out, this person that was supposed to be the central character becomes a secondary character, because the story that we find is a lot more interesting. So do you feel that going into it with a much more structured approach has worked for you guys, or do you start off with the structure approach, but then you have to be able to kind of switch once you get into the process and into the edit?
Can I say something? Well, I think that that I've heard it somewhere that documentaries as like jazz, more than like a score of a, let's say, of a Beethoven piece or composition. There's more, you can improvise, and you have to be. It's not a straitjacket. Forms should not be a straitjacket. But one thing that you mentioned about the Thin Blue Line, and I may take this to another direction, but one thing that I really like about that film is how Errol Morris got involved so much with that project, with that case, over the years. It took him years to make that film, but in the end, he did something very beautiful, because the documentary made justice to the people in it. The person that was going to be, in the chair or whatever, was found not guilty in the end, thanks to the film. So that documentary, Errol Morris.
Spoiler alert! Sorry.
He saved his life, and that's how I think we people that make documentaries should engage, with or we should commit ourselves with our people that we have in the frame. And that's something that I really respect about Errol Morris. And how also one thing I really like about him is how the interviews that he does. He has to design a way of interviewing people so that, for instance, they will see you right through your eyes, apparently. But the way he questions, he puts forward the questions, makes you see the inside of the people. I mean, it's like an X-ray of the people, and suddenly all those talking faces or talking heads become like incredible landscapes where you can find the truth. Where's truth, and where's the gray zone in that character, and it keeps you. Wow, I mean, you never. It cannot be more cinematic, and yet sometimes it's just a talking head, and still very cinematic. So I don't think there are many rules, and except be good to the people that give you their time, their patience, their knowledge, their confidence, and do not betray the people, and also use maybe the crew. If you're a bit lost, maybe your writer or your cameraman or your sound recorders has an idea how to go through a problem, and so be all ears, I say, and be all eyes, and then there are no rules. Some projects may take weeks to be made, and others, like in my case, the film about my parents and my grandparents, another film that was shown at San Diego 3 years ago or 2 years ago, took me 7 years, because getting the footage, the archival footage was hell, also very, very expensive, but there are no, I don't think there's rules. The rule is, why, I think is do something that can affect people in a good way. Give them knowledge or give them good emotions, make them feel for justice, for beauty, make them feel something, that's worth sharing.
I think what you said, Luis, I agree. I think that, regardless of the films that I make, whether it be a documentary or a narrative or a PSA even, I think that it's about cinema for social change, right? It's not art for art's sake. I mean, I'm very much influenced by like the third cinema movement of the 60s and 70s, civil rights movement, things like that, was about action, creating action at the end of the day. There are films that were revolutions have started after the films were being screened, right? And so I think that, that's one of the reasons why I like Errol Morris as well. But I think that, to be honest with you, if I have to be completely honest, I tell a lot of my students sometimes, I know that the most successful films that I've made, documentaries in particular, were the ones that I planned out the most in advance. And that's because, not to say that I don't take creative liberties or follow different ideas in post-production, right? But that the structure itself, in particular with the pre-production plan that I do for the documentary and the shot list and the questions and the preliminary research, all of that for me really does help me get the issue that I'm trying to tackle and the way that I want to convey it clear in my mind. And that's just really the way that I approach it. But I have had other documentaries that I hadn't planned at all that have been to Cannes, and they didn't even have a script, right? I mean, I got inducted into the Writers Guild Theater, grandfathered into it from a project that I didn't even write a script for, right? Which is weird to me to even think about that. But then there's others that I've entered, like the one that I am screening here in this film festival, that I planned out very much so with other poets and artists that were working with me on structuring the story. So I think that each project's different. I think that each, creative process changes depending on the project. I think that observational documentaries, when you're just a fly on the wall, you're going to make a lot of decisions in the editing room because you're collecting as much footage as possible. So that's ingrained into the mode and into the production process. I think with a participatory documentary, you're going to have a lot more creative freedom, like Michael Moore does, right? You find a story and you go down that rabbit hole and your story may change, right? And so you're adapting. I think that it's very controlling when you have a producer, oftentimes in corporate projects that I work on, that will want to transcribe all of my footage and then tell me exactly how to construct the interviews. And I think that that is an extreme amount of micromanagement that I think is not really conducive to artistic expression. So, that's just my take on it. But
I think you're right, and I don't want to monopolize this. This is supposed to be a dialogue, but you mentioned Michael Moore.
Okay. Yep.
And Malcolm Moore or Herzog. I mean, you may see them on the screen. You see Herzog with his heavy German accent here and there, but the point is that he takes us to see things differently, like Michael Moore, from another angle. So it's not whether he is a plump man, a nice looking guy, or the thing is that he makes you things differently somehow, and that's through research. So one thing documentary needs is research. That's it. And if you have research, your film will be cheaper. Your film will have the best locations, the best. Your casting will be easier. Once because research tells you, or you should know after research what you want to say and what you need in order to say what you want to say through a certain story. So, and then yes, that every project is different, and that's nice, because imagine how boring it would be if all the documents were the same process to make one. Sometimes you even enjoy suffering, because they say, "Oh, I haven't suffered enough in this documentary. Maybe the gods are not with me." Sometimes the gods manifest themselves when you're suffering, when you don't know what to do next, or when you say, "Hey, I have this interview, and now I cannot use it. How? What can I tell this guy? Sorry, I have to take you from the film," or I don't know. Sometimes you have to suffer. I'm not a masochist. I'm just saying that sometimes when things are too easy, I don't know. Sometimes there's something wrong. Something you're not doing right, no? But I agree with you, but all those filmmakers that we admire, like Herzog or Robert Drew or Fred Wiseman, I mean, they're good people, and that's one thing I love. I mean, Wiseman is Harvard. He was at Harvard. He's a lawyer, a PhD, and Robert Drew is I don't know. That's one of my very great heroes, Robert Drew, and his films, direct cinema. After all, the Masons and Wiseman, they all took borrowed things from Robert Drew, or Les Blanc. It's joy of life and joy of diversity. So I like what you say, and I want to compliment or to add to what you were saying, what Luis Martinez also saying.
I also think that it's important, and this is why I think the San Diego Latino Film Festival is so important, is to promote Latino filmmakers and documentarians, because other than Lourdes Portillo, maybe, that I know, is one of the Mexicanas that I know that really has been doing it for a long time. We don't get a lot of exposure, and so without opportunities like this, it's great to hail the great masters, of all their work, but the begging question in my mind is, where are all the Latino Chicano filmmakers, that need to be promoted, and so I think that needs to change too.
Yes, well, many years ago at the film school where I teach, we used to do like an encounter of documentary filmmakers, and we always had a Latino, or actually more than Latino, more Chicano filmmakers there. So we had Lourdes Portillo, and we had Paul Espinosa once in Mexico, and the guy who made the series called Latino. There's a documentary series, Yolanda something, and well, the names are not in my head right now. And maybe we should do that more often. Right now, we don't have to travel, maybe like Zoom or with this platform, but I would really like, I don't know, the students at my school, well, it's a public school, but my students to share and to know, well, to make use of what now that Moises is introducing ourselves, or introducing us to ourselves, and to do something more than that, beyond the festival, to go beyond.
Absolutely. Well, I volunteer if you guys need something, because I have my own stream and podcast, and I love to talk about all kinds of filmmaking. So I'll drop you guys my email, and we can definitely coordinate something like that future. But obviously, I'm also very thankful that some of the QAs I've gotten to do over the last couple of years for the festival, from the one last year, I did a bunch of awesome interviews with Latina documentarians about from topics from Texas to Colombia to all over the world. So I'm really grateful that I've gotten to have those conversations with people. The lady I interviewed last year, who did the Cuban documentary, I forgot the name of it, about letters to that Cuban writer, and we had an awesome
Padura or what Cuban?
It was letters to something, right?
Last year,
I was going to say Leles Ochoa, but that's not the documentary that we're talking
No,
about.
no, it was about letters to Eloisa or something like that. It was, but it was a Cuban American filmmaker from Miami, and so like I said, I'm always open to learning. So like I'm part of the festival, and I've been part of the festival because of my narratives, and most of my films are like most of my films are like comedy driven. There's a lot of comedy and stuff like that because I don't make the typical like important films, but I also think it's important to laugh and to have a variety.
Yes, well,
the film was Letters to Eloisa.
Letters to Eloisa, yeah.
I don't know that film, but I like comedy, and I think it's the most difficult genre.
It's tough. It's tough.
You know.
Well, I want to thank all three of you for your time. I think this was a great warm-up for the Q&As that you will have at some point tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your films with the San Diego Latino Film Festival. Thanks so much for all your insight and guidance through this that was included in this discussion. Definitely learned a lot, I think, from connecting with the three of you. And I hope that your screenings go well and that the Q&As go well as well. And if anyone has any closing remarks, feel free to take it away.
Well, I've seen closing remarks. I've seen several films already competing in the festival, mostly documentaries. I must admit, and they're all very, very good. So I encourage you to see as many as you can see, not only the features but the shorts. And so that's the only message. You know, that's difficult because to see so many films that have something to say also. They're well done, but they have a point. They make a point in films with a heart, so to speak, you know. Well, that's it.
Sorry, we have a comment from Marguerite Bacchus. Says, I love to see you all interviewed on. This is Luis Martinez's channel, 2 a.m. Burrito with Luis Martinez. Thanks, everyone. Very educational and inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marguerite.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean the only statement that I have is check out the film A Mi Matria. That it's probably going to be one of the last festivals that we're going to be screening at. It's been touring for a while now, and check out again all of the amazing films from all of the Frontera. I want to give a special shout out to the Frontera filmmakers. Support your own, support the film industry in San Diego. We need more voices coming out of San Diego. If you ever want to check out any of my work, greeneyemedia.com, hiddengemproject.com. We got studios in LA, San Francisco, or Oakland, and Seattle. And we're out here working with all communities of color, not just Latinos and Chicanos, but all people of color so that we can stay united and work together so that we can advance, these important missions and policies that we need to fight for. So.
Awesome. And if you guys we're doing a Q&A later for $4.99 if you guys want to stop by, and then I'll connect with you guys later so we can have you guys on.
Okay, Luis, thank you.
Thank you all for participating, and best of luck with everything. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Later, guys.
Bye-bye.